So it's a little more enjoyable this year, compared to the rumors last year. So,
what sort of Michigan man inside information do you have about from one Wolverine to another? What do you think is going to happen to Harbaugh?
I don't know.
He doesn't know. Rich Eisen doesn't know. That was Jim Harbaugh there at the outset last night in Texas. The audio from KHOU in Houston. And that was Rich Eisen on the Peter King podcast. That was Peter King at the beginning asking him the question about the details on Jim Harbaugh. And he said, I don't know. Let's get things going here on the Maize and Blue review. And we bring in the senior editor of TMBR. That's Brandon Justice. And if you're like, wait a second, he's the recruiting editor. He was. And he's now wearing a new hat, but he's still going to have that other hat in there somewhere. I'll let him explain it. He's up first here and joining us here on this Thursday. What's going on, Brandon?
Dennis, how you doing?
I'm doing good. So tell everybody, a senior editor now, and also with his hands in recruiting as well. Congratulations.
Appreciate it. Yeah. So essentially what changes isn't a whole lot. On the recruiting side of things, everything stays the same. You should expect to see things from myself, Zach Libby, and Tanner Wooten, and we'll still be at the forefront there. Josh will still be providing some, insider intel there on the recruiting side. So the recruiting beat really doesn't change. What changes here is you'll see my name pop up on the football beat a lot more now, as opposed to before. So I'll just have my hands in a couple baskets on top of the basketball beat too. And really what's changing more than anything are some behind the scenes things, just working with those guys on the beat, Daniel Dash with basketball, working on the beat myself, football with Josh, and then, potentially Dash as well. So we're really just working towards getting things again. I mean, we're still kind of new here, right? We kind of got lost in our tracks with over these past couple months, been so crazy with Michigan going to the playoff. The momentum that not only the team was riding, but our brand was riding. We kind of forgot how new we are here. So there are certainly still some things that we're trying to iron out day by day and get better at, so that by the time football season comes around next year, we're better prepared even more than we were this year. And then obviously learning as we go here during basketball season. But as far as my position, the only thing that really changes that our readers are going to see, or viewers if they're on this podcast, is you'll just see me more involved on the team side of things with both football and basketball. Everything else is mostly behind the scenes, but we're really excited about it. We're really thankful for what Adam was able to do for us at this position, and thankful for him entirely. He was great while he was here, and he's been great ever since I've known him for the past 5 years that I've known him. So we're really looking forward to the future and what we're able to do. We were really fortunate to be able to now provide Zach a greater opportunity to provide some more recruiting intel for us and information for us, by putting him officially on the staff. He's officially hired and all of that, which is great for us. So really excited for what we're able to do here so far, but we're more focused on what we can do next and what's in store for 2022. And again, I'll always round it off with this, very thankful for Josh and the opportunity he has provided all of us. And I think we got the bull by the horns. So I think we're going to have a good time.
Well, we got a real good taste of it, November and December. And then the last day of December, you got a basketball game the day before New Year's Eve, and you got football trying to go to the championship game. And then there's been nothing, I think, that's it. We've had one basketball game since then. We did have Michigan play at Rutgers, but, the basketball team playing, 2 games in a month. You really got that feast and famine going, and what it feels like when everything's coming at you a million miles an hour, and then it slows down to a crawl. And here we are. So many different things to talk about. I saw you posting something about basketball. How about we start right there? We are going to get to Jim Harbaugh and see what Brandon, he has to say about this situation, saga, whatever you want to call it. But first, I saw you tweeting something about what Juwan Howard had to say about the possibility of being on the hardwood and actually resuming the basketball season. It sounds like they're going to give it a go here. Is that what the word is?
That's the hope. That's the plan. Again, a lot of these things are day by day and hour by hour and minute by minute. We talk about those picks that we make every day on sharpening the edge, and those picks are wait around to pick them until 5 o'clock because that's the best time to get the most accurate information on what the roster is going to look like for each team. Well, the same can be said about Michigan's schedule. It's really hard to tell right now if they're going to be able to iron out things to be able to play that game. But it seems like that's going to be the case as of right now. And what a way to get back into things, right? You got to play Illinois, and you're in the thick of things in Big Ten play. The rest of the conference has played more in-conference games than you, and I'm almost positive most of those teams have played far more games than Michigan has in that time span as well. So it's something right now where we've talked about this so many times with various things. I mean, we talked about it with the national championship and the college football playoff was, the availability of some players for Michigan. You remember the Dax Hill situation, so we're dealing with these things all over, and they're always going to be hard to, put a pin on. And our job is really to provide the analysis on things to clear things up so that people understand what's happening, so that people with sitting at home who can't formulate an opinion on things can have a clear mind. That's what we come here for, right? Well, it's hard to do that when we don't know anything about what's going to happen with COVID. So we shall see. However, I think that the challenge that awaits them is about as tough as it gets. I mean, you were going to kick off against Michigan State at home, and I think that's arguably a better way to get back into it because at the very least, that's your arch nemesis, in-state rival, yada, yada, yada. Now, this you can argue because Illinois and Michigan State both having good years and all of that. And Michigan State's obviously outperformed expectations by a long shot and now are being talked about as a potential tournament run type of team. So, Michigan, regardless, in the Big Ten, when you're playing college basketball in the Big Ten, you're going to have a challenge no matter who you're playing for the most part. And now Michigan has this really uncharted territory where they have to go from being they were it's not like they were in any kind of role or any kind of momentum. They were struggling. No. And then they go into a break that they weren't ready for. And now you're missing players. I mean, Juwan Howard was talking about it today in his media availability. And he says, hey, look, no matter who we get at practice, like we're going to, we know we're going to get the most out of them. And that's easy to say. And I completely agree with him. You're working with what you got. You can't dwell. But it's no secret that it's hard to not know who's going to be at practice that day based on testing and all of that. It's hard to know. It's hard to come up with a strategy for a game that may or may not happen with a roster that you don't know if you're going to have or not based on who's going to be available or not. I mean, all of these things are Juwan Howard was questioned when he was hired because of his experience, lack of experience as a head coach and lack of experience as a college head coach. And then you mix in this stuff 2 years later and it's like, okay, well, he's finally got that experience under his belt, but nobody has experience with anything like this. There's no, they don't give you training on how to handle things like this when you're rising up in the ranks because these things didn't exist 3-4 years ago or beyond then. So it'll be interesting. I think Juwan Howard's a master motivator. I think he's a master communicator. I think he does a really good job on relating with his kids and meeting them in the middle and finding a way to make things work for them. And if anyone can do it, I think that it is Juwan and Phil Martelli and Sadie Washington and all those guys. But the challenge is real, and I don't think that they're going to go out there and beat Illinois. I don't, but I think that, again, we talked about it with the Michigan State game when we thought it was going to happen. It is an opportunity each time to turn this thing around. If they can get out in that court and make a tip off, there's an opportunity for them to turn this whole thing around. But we got to get there first, and we got to see what the product is with all this time off.
Talking about things that weren't available the last couple of years, things that weren't available last year at this time was legalized gambling. And so, as part of it, when you look at it, I was surprised that first game that Michigan played at Rutgers. Before I looked at the line, I thought, I think Rutgers probably favored by a point or two. They're at home. They beat Purdue. They're zeroing in because they had lost whatever 14 or the 15 games that they played against Michigan by double figures. This was a game that I thought that, Rutgers be a couple point favorite. So then I was surprised when I saw Michigan was a 4-point favorite. And, then they, had the 4 or 5 players that weren't available. And we know that they got beat pretty soundly. But then I was, looking towards Saturday against Michigan State. And I said, Michigan State would be 7-8 point favorite. If I was put that line down there, and I almost had to do it twice, like, what? Michigan's favored. I couldn't believe that. Now, Rutgers went to Champaign and lost by 35 to Illinois. Mm-hmm. So, Michigan, I don't really know what's been going on with the practice, but I'm assuming that not everybody, they haven't had all hands on deck. And I would think that they would be a double-digit underdog if they do play this game tomorrow. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you mix in. So the first thing is Illinois is at home, so you gift them 3 points for being at home. And then you bring up how good of a team Illinois is. I mean, they're 12-3 overall, but they've covered the spread 3 out of their past 4 games. Or I'm sorry, 4 out of their past 5 games, and they've covered the spread 2 out of the last 3 times in conference. The only time they didn't cover was against Nebraska when they were 12.5-point favorites, and they won by 10, so they didn't cover by 2.5 points. So all that being said, was their only time they haven't covered the spread in conference play over the past 5 games. It was still a 10-point win. It's still a double-digit win, albeit against Nebraska. But, I think that the point stands. So, yeah, I think you make a good point in that this game will probably end up being in that 8.5 to 10-point mark. It might go higher. I think where it's set at will be interesting because I guarantee you there will be movement because here's the thing, and I don't really talk about this that much in writing on Sharpening the Edge, but when we see these sharp moves and we see pro bettors, quote unquote, or sharp money or smart money, whatever you want to call it, when we see those things come in and you see the
My
movement
money.
happen, those things aren't happening because those guys are smarter than us, because those guys just simulate these games and see something different than they do. They know something that we don't. I mean, these guys are plugged into places. They're professionals for a reason. They don't just have hunches, right? So when we see this movement, it's telling. It doesn't necessarily mean it's like injury information we don't have or code information that we don't have. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It's just they have a matchup edge. There's something they know about this game that we might not know. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't happen in every game. It happens in, anywhere from 3 to 5 games out of all the leagues per day, sometimes more, a lot more, sometimes less, a lot less, give or take on the day and the time of year. In this game's instance, I'm interested to see where Vegas sets it at and projects it at with all these uncertainties on Michigan's roster. So will they play it safe and make Michigan a 12, 13-point dog and try to save the cash that might come in on Illinois if they're maybe a 6 or 7-point dog? Because if if they open up with Illinois as like a 7.5, 8.5-point favorite, I mean, naked eye here without looking into it too much, I'd probably hammer it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think Michigan has much of a shot on the road to Illinois off of all this. It's college sports. I think Juwan Howard's a great coach, and I think Michigan takes Illinois very personally. So there is a chance that some unlikeliness happens. I mean, that's the beauty of not just sports, but especially college sports. So I'm not sitting here guaranteeing anything, but that's the tell right now, is that you're expecting it to be in that 10.5, 11.5-point range so that Vegas can kind of see where bettors go from there. If they see a bunch of big money come in on Michigan, they'll shift their way down early. If they see a bunch of money come in on Illinois, they'll open it up some more and kind of save their butts a little bit. But it'll be interesting to see where it goes. Obviously, we need to be sure that this game's being played and it's all going as planned right now, but there's still not a line out. So we'll see what happens.
Well, speaking of lines, we're going to talk about the upcoming recruiting weekend ahead here, but I'm staying with the gambling thing. I was looking at, some of the sites in the desert, and of course they have projections and lines on who the favorites are to be the next head coaches in the NFL and in the coaching carousel. And I was surprised to see that the favorite to be the next head coach of the Chicago Bears was none other than Jim Harbaugh. My friend that lives in Vegas says, the conversation about this week's game with Cincinnati, they're in love with the Raiders. I mean, they love the Raiders and they love the story of Rich Bisaccia. But if the interim head coach goes to Cincy and they get wiped off the field there, then he feels like Vegas will then install Jim Harbaugh as the favorite there for the Raiders job. Now, you're good with predictions, and how do you think this plays out? Everybody wants to know your opinion about this Jim Harbaugh situation.
As far as him being the favorite to go to the Bears, I think that Vegas knows if it puts out a favorable line on Harbaugh landing somewhere, the average bettor, non-pros are going to see that and be like, oh my God, look at these odds. Harbaugh's going to go there. Let's all throw money on it. And Vegas is just like, thank you. Like, thank you for the donation, because he's not, I don't think that's where he's going to end up personally, even if he does go to the league. And
you don't think he likes Justin Fields?
I'm not sure if it's I'm not sure if it's Justin Fields or if it's like 14 or 15 million for Mark Davis, but maybe we'll find out. But I think it's just one of those things where you're looking at those coaching favorite lines where it's like next coach to be or whatever they decide to name it. And, the highly favored one being Jim Harbaugh, I think it's still in the positives. I think it's still like a plus 150 plus 175 line, maybe even higher. And I think that that's more of like a, hey, come bet this because it's telling you it's easy money based on the line. And it's probably not going to happen. As far as the Raiders go, I do think it's interesting because of the connections Harbaugh has there. Now, the connection Harbaugh has with the Bears is what? He played there. That's it. There's really nothing else to it. He played for the Colts too. He played. Is there another connection I'm missing here?
Well, they drafted him in the first round, and the
Yeah.
Bears fans love Mike Ditka so much, and Harbaugh, it's one of these things like it'd be bringing back Ditka and Harbaugh. I mean, that's the connection, and it's pointed out to me by my friend who's from Chicago that Harbaugh played with the Bears longer than he played for the Wolverines at quarterback, so they feel like he's their native son, that way. But I mean, that's just how they look at it. I mean, every team looks at. In every area of the country looks at things differently, but Chicago fans really think that Jim Harbaugh is like an extension of Mike Ditka, and they love the Mike Ditka era. Let's be honest.
Right. And, Jim Harbaugh has that style that is willing to evolve, but wants to keep its original ideologies in mind. He doesn't want to change his foundation, but he's willing to evolve the branches. You know what I'm saying? So, and I think that when it comes to what his decision ultimately is, it comes down to a few things. First and foremost, I think that Jim Harbaugh is more concentrated on his assistant's salary pool than anything else when it comes to his new deal with Michigan, because what goes into retaining the staff that you have, which has been an issue for Michigan. Clemson has been the, the poster boy, I guess you could say, for retaining assistants, right? And they lose them both this year, but all the same, to hold on to Venables and Elliott that long was something. Alabama doesn't often lose its coordinators and assistant coaches every single year. They do move on, but the turnover rate at Michigan has been a little bit of a concern over time, and it hasn't been in these past 2 seasons. And I think Jim Harbaugh wants to keep it that way. And we talked about it ad nauseum this year. The change in the locker room this year had a lot of credit towards the staff. I mean, you talk about guys like Sharon Moore, who are coveted and wanted by other schools, Josh Gaddis, who was interviewed for head coaching positions, Mike McDonald, who will probably get an NFL coordinator type of position opportunity in the next 2 to 3 years, I believe. And so Jim Harbaugh is doing everything he can to keep those guys around. And how do you keep people around? You pay them their value. Jim Harbaugh went from being in the top 5 highest paid coaches in college football to the not even being the top 5 paid coach in the conference. The 5 guys making more money than him in the Big Ten, he beat this year. And the 5 guys, of those 5, 4 of them he hasn't lost to. So, well, he lost to Kirk Ferentz and he lost to James Franklin once or twice. So besides those 2, I mean, he lost to Ryan Day and beat Ryan Day. So, it's just one of those things where Jim Harbaugh is obviously going to get his value with this new deal. That's the whole point. It's not like he's playing hostage. We've said it on the board, but if you haven't read the board, to anybody watching, business is as usual in Schembechler Hall. If you were in there as a pedestrian and you just got one of these like exclusive tours through it all and you got to witness the vibe in there and the mood in there, it's been a consensus from everyone inside the program that things are operating as if nothing else is going on in the outside world, which seems to be the case every time this happens every year. Now, I do believe this year is far different than any other year. Why? Because in the past, when the NFL is called, they've had the pressure of having to come in and up a extremely lucrative and arguably overpaid contract that Jim Harbaugh had until this point. Now the NFL has the higher ground. It knows it can come in and double, maybe even triple his salary. If Matt Rule is making $9.5 million, there's no reason Jim Harbaugh shouldn't make 11 or 12 himself. And he's only making 4 right now as it is. So the NFL has this unique opportunity that it hasn't had in the years past, where it can come in and get him. Now the big thing here with Jim Harbaugh is we see every year how many coaches get fired in the NFL. I mean, as soon as week 18 ended, what was it, 4 or 5 coaches were already done, and that's a constant thing. It's an annual thing. That's why they call it Black Monday. It happens every single year. It's so hard to find a consistent pillar as a head coach who has proven success and no off-field baggage. Jim Harbaugh is one of very few that has on-field success, 3 conference championships, a Super Bowl trip, and no off-field baggage. And he's only had one round at it. Think about some of these coaches, and think about Bill Belichick. The Patriots weren't his first job. Jim Harbaugh's first NFL head coaching job was an extremely successful one, and a rebuild combined. It's not like he inherited something great. So it's unique because this year, not only does the NFL have the opportunity to come in and make a deal, make an offer that's easy. It's easy for them to up the deal. It was not easy in the past for them to come in and up his deal he had prior. And then on top of that, there's potentially a better situation for Jim Harbaugh in the NFL now compared to when he had to go to San Francisco. What's telling here and what's most interesting is the Las Vegas thing, because Sarah Harbaugh obviously has a history on the West Coast. It's where they met. It's where they, spent the bulk of the beginning of their marriage. And then before coming over to Ann Arbor to coach at Michigan, that's who she was. She was a West Coast girl. And happy wife, happy life. That's kind of how we always say it, right? So with that in mind, it's interesting to see the connections that the Raiders have with Jim Harbaugh. Mark Davis, huge Jim Harbaugh fan. They have a great relationship. We all know that. Jim Harbaugh, a Raider, he's been connected with the organization beyond just ownership. And then you talk about the family connection that we just mentioned. So there are some things that the Raiders have to offer, not just money, which they have a ton of as well. They just built a $1.8 billion stadium. To think that they can't fund a $12 to $14 million contract would be naive. So it's interesting. How do I see it shaking out, though? I mean, I think he's going to stay because of all that we've heard. I mean, like I said, it's been a consensus among everyone inside the program that business is as usual. So if Jim Harbaugh, who's been calling recruits all week and is on the road now to recruit, suddenly decides he's going to go to the NFL, it would be a shock to everyone involved. And I don't think Jim Harbaugh is that kind of person.
Tell me about what appears to be a low-key approach when it comes to name, image, and likeness. Like if Michigan is, they do have some plans, and maybe Jim Harbaugh did talk about this with the leverage that he has now and what they want to do. Michigan taking the low-key approach.
Mm-hmm.
My thought about this is that, for the last, 20 or 30 years, anytime I've seen a recruit go elsewhere, I've seen somebody online putting dollar signs and they're cheaters. And it's become a thing for Michigan, whether it's right or wrong. Like Michigan fans, as soon as they lose somebody, dollar sign you, and
Right.
they send them the bag and all of this. So the transition, I think, for a lot of Michigan fans and maybe the alumni, maybe the boosters here, it's hard now that they're like, hey, you can be what you guys have looked at and have used as a reason or excuse all these years. You don't have to have that. You can be, you're one of them now. And Michigan's, I don't know if it's pride or if they want their approach to it. Do you think that has something to do with it? Is there a reason that they would play it, kind of on the down low here instead of, trumpets and, all this other stuff that I think a lot of people want to see?
Well, I think it starts and ends with the culture that Jim Harbaugh's always had at each stop he's been. I mean, there's some things that he's changed in the culture here at Michigan over the past year. We know that. I think that's a big reason why they were as successful as they were this season. But there's one thing that Harbaugh's really always put at the forefront, and that's character, recruiting it and then signing it in the NFL and recruiting it at the college level. Each stop, San Diego, Stanford here, it doesn't matter. And with that in mind, I think he wants to differentiate, is this kid coming here because he's getting paid, or is this kid coming here because he wants to play for Michigan? And as we know, Jim Harbaugh is a huge come play for Michigan. Those who stay will be champions, traditional kind of guy. So it's one of those things where the NIL is really good for athletes, and Jim Harbaugh completely advocates for that. Athletes getting paid. He's always been about that. What he hasn't been about is this becoming a free agency sort of situation where it becomes a bidding war to land a kid, because then you start to think about it like, are we now doing this to benefit the kid, or are we doing this to benefit our program and then, the business who's providing it as well? And now it starts to become a little bit icky, right? This is still football that we're talking about, and this is still a student athlete driven sport. That is supposed to put at the forefront making student athletes better people, right? So, and that's what Jim Harbaugh has always been about. So I think it's a little bit of the imbalance of the NIL's kickoff so far, whereas some schools have kind of been like, hey, let's just put pedal to the metal and make this thing happen. Michigan's taken its time and made sure its edges are cut and its I's and T's are crossed and dotted. And with that in mind, I think that what they're trying to iron out this offseason is a clear system that puts them at an advantage and landing the kids who it may require to, bump this NIL up, but still keeping its integrity in mind at the same time. And Jim Harbaugh, as we know, and I think this is a relevant thing to bring up in terms of the NFL as well. On top of this NIL, Jim Harbaugh is not a sellout. He's never been a sellout. He didn't come back to Michigan to make more money. He came back to Michigan because, the prodigal son that you kind of brought up with the Bears as well. I thought I kind of laughed at that because the Bears saying that is just funny to me, because there were books written about Jim Harbaugh coming to coach this team decades ago with Bo Schembechler wanting to come back here. This was kind of written in stone, right? So it's interesting, but I believe that's like the best way I can explain the NIL. I'm not in Jim Harbaugh's head or office, so I don't know what exactly is driving him to maybe not ramp this up as much as people have wanted. But I do believe it's due to them just wanting to make sure this whole thing keeps them within rules. Like I said, T's crossed, I's dotted, integrity in mind and at the forefront, and then making sure that the kids they are giving this NIL forefront to are still qualifying character-wise to be here at Michigan. And it's something that they've always taken serious. So that doesn't change.
Yeah, and you know what? When I'm listening to you, it's also a very delicate situation. If just say, if Dante Moore, if ultimately they sign him to the quarterback prospect from King, who I'm sure Michigan has pretty high up on their list who they want. Everybody knows pretty much who he is. If Michigan was offering him $500,000 or $1 million and, that got out publicly, you just look at the quarterback room, JJ McCarthy could be like, all right.
Yeah, like what's going on here?
I got $2 million. Cade's right. Like, I just delivered a Big Ten championship. I need some, at least that. So, I mean, that's the part where if you were in before and you were operating in the gray areas, however you were getting that money, you could continue to do that and just kind of, wait until, a couple of years till the guys at the end are all getting the money. Then you can make it a lot more visible. But, Michigan just coming out, that I think that's another part of it. Like, you can have guys at the end of the upperclassmen saying, hey, if these guys are getting paid, I need to too. I don't know. I'm sure all of that gets talked about.
Yeah, you bring up a great point and you bring up a great case, JJ McCarthy. Now, remember when this whole NIL thing came about and was officially official and, the floodgates opened, JJ McCarthy was probably the most questioned student athlete on Michigan's team and in the entire program as a freshman. He had been on campus for not a long time, and all these questions are coming in for him about what are you going to do with the NIL and, what kind of deals are you going to make and yada, 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 to the point where he had to, I don't know if you remember this, but he had to actually release a statement in regards to his stance on the NIL, and how it read was, and this is paraphrasing because it was months ago and I don't remember what I did yesterday, but he basically put into words that despite wanting to exercise any possibilities that he could have with the NIL, his priority was to play football for Michigan and be a student at the university. And I think JJ McCarthy embodies what this, program wants to become. I mean, that he's the kid who got off the bus from, I forgot which game it was, but went and trained on the field with Donovan Edwards and I forgot who I think it was Andrell Anthony. And Andrell Anthony at like 1 a.m. That's who these guys are. That's who this program wants. They want a bunch of JJ, Donovan Edwards, and Andrels in their program, guys who, are willing to release statements about an NIL that says, hey, look, like I'm going to do it and I'm all about it. And I think it's great for athletes, but I'm a football player at Michigan and I'm a student at the university before I'm anything else. And that was how the statement read, and it was very well versed. And it's just one of those things where I think he kind of embodies exactly what Michigan hopes to get out of the NIL is kids of his stature, kids of his quote unquote ranking and all of that, but kids who are still down to earth and understand that this opportunity still is first and foremost to play on the football field. I think Quinn Ewers is interesting, right? Because that's a kid who took 3 snaps at Ohio State, but he made him $1.1 million while being there. It's just,
it's a lot per snap.
And here's the thing. What if Michigan had Quinn Ewers? What if he came here and now he's gone? And no, the $1 million didn't come out of Ohio State's pocket. It came out, I think it was like a dealership or something, but all the same, like, that's a messy situation. And now Ohio State's probably tapping some brakes when it comes to these NIL deals, because there's really nothing guaranteed out of the athlete. They don't have to stay at the school. when they sign these things. So Michigan, again, if a kid's walking into a visit, let's say a huge 5-star comes on an official visit and his first conversation is NIL, I don't know if they're going to take him, because that's not that's not something that they want at the forefront. They don't want kids coming to Michigan because of money. They want kids coming to Michigan because of the tradition that it's built itself on and the culture that really evolved over the past calendar year. It's something that they understand they're going to have to put inside their formula and put in their recipe to compete for those kind of kids. But, I don't think that I think that's the best way to explain the situation, to be honest. And until we get a clear kind of announcement or whatever out of Michigan, which I don't know if we'll ever get, but we'll begin to see things change here soon. I think the deal, when Harbaugh gets this deal done, I do believe he stays, by the way. I don't know if I ever actually stated that, but I'm pretty strong in my opinion that he stays, based on just the atmosphere of the building right now and all of that. And I believe when the deal is done, there will be some NIL stuff ironed out. And I believe that's something that they're trying to figure out with this whole deal, is not only assistants pay and his pay and all of that, but, also the NIL and making sure that they're in a good spot going in. That's, again, crossing T's and dotting I's and making sure our edges are sharp and all of that. But keeping integrity at the forefront while still giving them the advantage to go compete against the Bamas and the Texases and the Ohio States in those recruiting battles.
You did explain that really well. And I agree with you that it looks like Harbaugh is going to stay here. Although, this weekend, can make people really nervous. Raiders lose by a lot to the Bengals, and you get to Monday and you almost get this feeling like, back maybe when you're maybe who knows what the situation is with you. If you're dating somebody and they're like, well, I want to, see other people. Whoa, like, wait a second, as soon as you get over there, Jim Harbaugh can say everything in the world and then everybody could have all the, the right intentions and everything else. But, you sit down with the Raiders or the Bears and they start saying, hey, here's full control. Go ahead, Jim, you can do whatever you want. You could pick you're the guy that's going to, you're the guy that's going to buy the groceries and you're also going to make the dinner here. And so what, we'll get you a GM, whoever you want there. That's got to be at least enticing. And maybe he just wants to hear it. And then he's like, all right, good. I'm going to stay at Michigan. But I mean, that's the worry, just getting through this. It was my worry back on Monday and then on Tuesday. And now here we are on a Thursday. It looks like, heading into this weekend, it feels like, all eyes are, on Cincinnati and what's going to happen with that Raiders game, just like it was Sunday night with the Raiders winning that game. So I don't know. Like, it is there. I could sit here all day long and talk about Harbaugh and, well, what about the Giants? I mean, all of it. So how about this weekend, not in the NFL, but opening up a period here where there's some contact and you can have visitors and some of the headlines there is Michigan. I know they've got their game plan or, as soon as the sun rises Saturday morning, is the staff going to be across the country knocking on doors and eating breakfast? I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, Andrew Paul is visiting this weekend, and he's a running back out of Texas, 3-star. And the situation is interesting with the 2022 running back, because Michigan basically was in a spot where they were going to get Trey Anum. They felt like they were going to get Trey Anum, the running back. And that the grad transfer from Arizona State, and that ended up falling through. And he goes to Ohio State to be a linebacker. And now Michigan's in a spot where they have 4, I believe, maybe 5 scholarship running backs. I think it's only 4 though. And with that in mind, you're going to need at least one more, right? So ideally, you're going to get the one. And with that being said, Andrew Paul is a kid out of Texas who's got a 5.5 Rivals rating, which isn't all that high, but his offer list is, incredibly impressive. And his tape surely says it all. Go watch it. It's super impressive. As soon as they offered him, I went and watched it and was pretty wowed by it. I didn't think that they were going to be able to get in on a kid of his talent level out of Texas this late, but he's got some serious stuff. He's a kid that I think if Michigan can do something here and wrap this up truly, then there is an opportunity to look back on this in a couple of years and be like, wow, that's a good call late in the cycle by Mike Hart to go out and get this kid. Now, I'm not saying Mike Hart was the guy who discovered him, but you think running backs coach, he's probably the guy that went ahead and said, yeah, let's offer this kid. So yeah, Paul will be on campus this weekend, and that's important. I mean, he's probably the more important visitor when it comes to recruits. You're going to have some 23s there, and we'll surely report on that as well. But of the important high school prospects, That's the guy that you're going to have. That's the most important for the running back position, because that group needs another one there. I know that Trayanum was like, they were trying to get a Hassan Haskins type, short yardage type, because Corum and Edwards, neither of those guys are built to be like 1 to 2 yard backs necessarily. They can be, don't get me wrong. I don't think that they're going to have any trouble getting you 1 or 2 personally, but they do want that big body physical kid to come in. And although Paul doesn't necessarily fit that mold, it's still there. I think they're willing to accept that they won't have a big physical back like Haskins in the group, but they'll at the very least still have the 5 on Scally rather than just 4. And I think more than anything, though, like all that being said, yes, 100% Michigan needs a running back, but all that being said, like that shouldn't discredit what Paul has done in his high school career, especially his senior year, and it shouldn't discredit who he could be as a college football player wherever he may end up. I think that if Michigan had 6, 7 running backs on scholarship, grabbing Paul was still a win.
You're right about Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, Tavier Dunlap, and CJ Stokes, who's part of this class. There are the 4 scholarship guys. I did see some, scuttlebutt on the Wolverine Den, the Maize and Blue review inside posting board there. A lot of people were concerned about the cold weather this weekend and how that would affect a guy from the, and, this is new. This is next level type, stuff here. But I don't know. It's interesting. If there's a guy, there were a few people on there. It's like, yeah, I came from out of town, and if it had been cold, I would never have stayed here. So maybe I don't know if you get a little bit lucky or unlucky with the weather when it comes down to that. But can't do anything about that. I mean, Paul comes in, and he's cold. He gets off the plane and it's 10 below. Why would I want to come here? Go to Miami.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, I understand what they're trying to say with that, and I understand that it's a concern, but like it's always a concern. Like you're in Michigan and you're going to go recruit nationally, and you're going to have those challenges. That's just nature of the beast, if you ask me. And I think that J.J. McCarthy went and played a year down in IMG in Bradenton, and you didn't see him budge or anything like that. And Michigan's had plenty of kids. I mean, David Long, the cornerback out of Pasadena, who was terrific here, came in from out west. I mean, freaking Tom Brady. I mean, do we need to say anymore? I mean,
No.
I think they have good references for when they go back and look at the kids who decided to come to Michigan, from the warm spots of wherever they might have been coming from. So
you're going to be tough if you're going to be a football player.
Yeah, and you know what?
Maybe the Packers draft you.
Like, I get it. Like, it's cold. Like, don't get me wrong, it's cold. But if this weekend, specific to this weekend, but anyone who's like, oh, well, I wish they would have had him come in on this date or that date. And it's like, wouldn't you want him to be, wouldn't you want to bring him in and say, hey, this right here is the worst it's going to get. You'll never have to deal with anything like this during the season. You'll never have to, if you're speaking to Paul specifically, you'll never have to run downhill doing anything with anything like this. No negative weather or anything like that. This is the worst of the worst. But, hey, your second semester is going to be tough. That's for sure. But I don't know. I'm thinking like if a kid's negative about it being cold in Michigan, he's not going to change his mind because he comes there in July and it's warm. Like, excuse my French, but no shit, it's going to be warm in July, in comparison to February. You know what I'm saying? That's just common sense. I think dad's probably in their ear like, hey, son, it's going to be freezing this weekend because it's Michigan. And if you're deciding to go there, I don't know. I just think that's a silly thing to get caught up in personally. But here I am getting caught up in it. But another visitor I wanted to mention, I should have mentioned him when you last asked, but Jeffrey Johnson, the defensive lineman from Tulane, the transfer, is coming to town, and he's been at LSU, and he's going a couple other. I think Missouri is on there as well. So he's making his rounds, but that's an important one for Michigan too. They'd love to add some defensive line depth, especially in the interior. Things didn't really work out with Jordan Whitley. I'm not entirely sure if he's coming back next year or not. But you would like to see them add another at the defensive line, especially with Chris Hinton going to the NFL. I mean, you were really expecting him to come back. I mean, I don't think anybody had any plans or anything etched out with him not coming back. And, you wish him the best because you look at multiple decisions that kids make where you're thinking okay, maybe that's not the best. And it works out tremendously for them. I think that's, we've seen on the basketball side with Jordan Poole and Franz Wagner most recently. And we've seen it on the football side a few times too. So I'm curious to see what Michigan does here with Johnson. I think that Right now, they're a little bit on the outside looking in, but that's how these transfer situations go. You really don't have a clear idea of what's going to happen unless there's a real strong connection there, maybe like a former coach who left the school he's currently at or anything like that. Until the visit, you really don't know. So I'm curious to see how it shakes out with Johnson this weekend. But he's an important one for them in the portal.
All right, well, let me get you out of here on a final. Here's the memorabilia minute.
Oh, wow.
It's a Tom Brady card. He's in action this week, taking on the Eagles. They should win. I was interesting right before I came on. I was listening to somebody talk about the NFL, some national guy, and I was surprised that he said that. I believe this is true. I didn't check him on it, and I started thinking like the Bucs were able to go into Lambeau and they won the NFC Championship game. Last year he said 10 of the last 14 road teams in the NFL playoffs are won outright. I thought, well, what? That sounds like a crazy trend. I didn't check him on that, and like I said, I can only think of that one game just right off the top of my head. But that seems to be a pretty strong trend. If that's it, is there a road team that you're looking at? Is there one of these teams that you're looking at that things seems ripe for an upset? I mean, what are you looking at with these playoff games here? One game.
All right.
You
know what? I honestly like the Niners. Truly, I mean, that's if there's any underdog I like this weekend, it'd be the Niners. I mean, I also am a bit high this week on. I was just on it. On the I mean, it's hard to pick against Pats in any sort of scenario. They've beaten the Bills once this year. A nice little trilogy here. So I would not be shocked to see if the Pats win. I don't know if with a rookie quarterback that's possible, but yeah, I like the Niners. I mean, hey, look, they got a good defense. Deebo Samuel is a game breaker. I mean, he does everything. Literally, he's thrown touchdowns, he's rushed for touchdowns, he's caught touchdowns. He plays running back, he plays receiver. So offensively, they have a really dynamic option there. And I think that I wouldn't be shocked if maybe there's some like Trey Lance packages where they mix things up and things like that. I just think that the Cowboys are coming off a red hot run there, and here's the thing with Cowboys: they're either the best team in the world or like they just play like crap. They're kind of topsy turvy. So I'm interested to see how they handle it. It's Mike McCarthy's first playoff game as a Cowboys coach. I've never been the biggest McCarthy guy personally, and I don't know how he coaches in big games, but I from my memory, it's not that great when it comes to the playoffs, given all the talent he had in Green Bay for all those years. So. And I'll always take a Shanahan. I've always been a big Shanahan fan. Both coaches, I think they're both great. So, yeah, I mean, hey, look, I mean, Jimmy G's not going to be the game breaker here, but I think Deebo Samuel gives you that opportunity. The big thing is I love San Francisco's defense. The pass defense is probably going to get picked apart by Dak a little bit, but I wouldn't be shocked to see like a 35-31 or like a 38-34 type of final here. I don't know. I got to look more into everything. And honestly, when it comes to the playoffs, it's so hard. I mean, if you looked at my picks from week 18, I mean, we went winless in week 18. It's because the NFL is the hardest league to pick when it comes to the final stretch and when it comes to those big games, because it's such an inconsistent, interchangeable league. The Jacksonville Jaguars ended the Colts season, and the Jags were the worst team, and the Colts had at one point been playing as one of the best teams in the league in the final stretch there. So it's real hard to predict. I'm going to be looking at signals though, so everyone stay tuned to Sharpening the Edge there, and I'll be updating you guys. But if I had to take a money line right now, I would take the Niners.
One last prediction, and it comes from Michael, who's asking you, when will the new Jim Harbaugh deal be final? Now that causes for it's a complete speculation for you, because
Precisely.
I don't know if Jim knows when that deal. If you could ask him, if he could tell you when that was going to be done. So I don't know. You're gonna try to pin the tail on the donkey here a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, I think Jim Harbaugh wants to get it done as soon as we all want it to get done, right? So we can all breathe, and I think he wants to breathe too, and I think he wants his staff to breathe and all of that. Even though it's business as usual in there, I'm sure he's not naive to the fact that people are hearing and reading things, and he wants recruits and all of that to understand that everything is still in place and ready to go for him as future at Michigan. So, if I had to pick a time, I guess I would say I don't know, maybe like Sunday or Monday. I wouldn't be shocked if it's a weekend thing, that they kind of just like they bury the lead and it's like a 7:00 on a Saturday or something like that. But it'd be really funny is if they did it in the middle of like a wild card game or in the middle of the Raiders game. that would be even more. That would be even better. So we'll see.
Surprising. My money's not going to be on that particular option, but my money will be on your whatever you do when I look on the Den, whether it's tomorrow or sometime on Saturday, because I'll be looking to see. I'm going with San Francisco, so I'm with you outright. I like it. Brandon, great job, and congratulations on the new role. We'll talk with you again soon.
Appreciate it. Have a great weekend, everyone.
I don't know.